All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. Got a lot of great stuff to talk about today. It's just a couple minutes after the hour. Thank you all for joining us today for our topic, smart budgeting. How much is enough? So hopefully, I think by our a high number of registrants, many of you are jumping into the budgeting season, so very topical conversation. And before we dive into our content, just a couple of logistical questions. Many of you, I think by now, are familiar with Zoom, but in the bottom of your Zoom widget, you should see a little button that says Q&A down there at the bottom. You can see on the screen where we've got the arrow pointing to it. So if you click on that, you can submit questions throughout the webinar in the question box. We've got some planned comments that we'll share for about 45 minutes or so. And then this certainly is scheduled for an hour and a half, so we might have 30 or more minutes that will then be able to answer questions that get submitted. And certainly I know sometimes people have to hop at the 1 o'clock Eastern time hour, which is fine. We're going to try to enable us to answer some questions leading up to that. But go ahead and submit those throughout the session, and we'll be answering those there at the end. So just to spend a moment giving you an overview of our plan for today. In a moment, we'll introduce ourselves. Then we're going to jump into setting the stage, preparing to budget as we're all entering this next budgeting season, talking about some things for all of us to be thinking about. And then Amy's going to go through some top questions to ask yourself as you're preparing for the budgeting process. And then I'll be coming back in to talk about connecting your budget to your strategic goals and really making that a powerful metrics-driven justified budget. And Amy will come back to talk about, okay, so let's make sure that we're having a budget that's going to accomplish the goals, but is also going to be within what the organization can support. And then we'll go into the Q&A period after we sort of summarize everything. So just to give everybody a little bit of an introduction, my name is Lisa Pari. I am one of the principals of Love & Company and the Chief Client Services Officer. And my team is the combination of our marketing strategy team as well as our sales advisory team. So together, those two aspects that are so integrated that we often refer to them as marketing, they are really the drivers of getting to the bottom line. So excited to be with you here today and ask my colleague Amy to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I am Amy Brody. I am the Vice President of Client Services. I work across all of our clients to help create and manage budgets that support our strategic marketing plans. So that's what brings me here today.
And I am very excited and honored that Amy, who is, I think, literally my right arm, is here with me today to talk about a topic that we get really excited about. So hopefully you can enjoy this journey with us as well. All right, so we're going to jump in and talk about setting the stage. As you're preparing to budget, what are we recommending here? So, I think a key thing is here that building your marketing budget, if it's done right, it's done well, this should be a powerful experience that brings clarity and unity to how your organization thinks about its revenue stream and its long-term viability. This is an exciting time to refine and recommit to key business goals that your organization has. And this should be a time when leadership, your finance team, marketing, you're all coming closer together in how you see investments turn into stable occupancy. So this is what it should be, but chances are you're here today because your experience is not one or maybe any of those things. And so this webinar we're giving here today, it's designed for organizations that are looking to make their budgeting process more effective, more productive, regardless of where your starting point is. So for some of you, you may already feel like you've got a pretty good budgeting process and you're looking for a couple of tweaks. We oftentimes say on our sales side that, even the best athletes have, a coach. And so you're looking for something that's just going to help you up your game a little bit. Now, for others, you may be looking for a complete overhaul. So we think that for whether you're in one, team or the other, that you're going to get something, valuable out of this time. So with that in mind, we're going to start with a simple homework assignment. But before jumping in, I just want to share one of my favorite quotes, and that's from Einstein, that says, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results." And really, I think that is something that's very key to what we're talking about today. So with that in mind, going into that homework assignment that I mentioned. So one of the very first things that we want you to do is to ask yourself, ask your team, how satisfied are we with our budgeting process and why? So use a scale of 1 to 10, have everybody give their rating, and, make everybody make their rating before they hear others, and then talk about the differences. And so, you really want to flesh out those areas that you need to address. And if you get nothing out of the webinar today, then holding those types of conversations prior to August, which is when many communities who have a fiscal year that starts January 1, we know that that's when a lot of you are in, right in the midst of your budget planning. So if you start these conversations with this topic, you'll already be on your way to more effective and better budgeting. Just one thing, I see a question pop up here that I should have mentioned up front, that we are recording this webinar, and that for all who registered and participated, we will be sharing this webinar. So if you need to leave early, or if you're, getting a hand cramp already trying to write down notes, don't worry, we will be sharing this webinar. So you'll be able to have access to that after the fact to go back and re-review. So on the webinar topic, we really built this webinar based on what we're consistently hearing organizations come to us for help with, or some of the challenges that they're expressing. So if you're like most life plan communities around the country, in the senior living field, your self-assessment is going to reflect one of these key themes. And we kind of call these sort of the usual suspects that we hear. So number one, we've always done it this way. So if your organization, if you're simply increasing the previous year's budget by a set percentage, or, if you're keeping the same budget from year to year, this is perhaps the most common trap we see, and particularly with communities that, gained and maintained a stabilized occupancy. And so you aren't being driven by external forces that are forcing you to ask yourselves hard questions about how each component of your marketing and sales program is working. We see this time and time again, where stabilized occupancy can lull you into a false sense of security. And so the downside is that when it comes time to address a problem, like a global pandemic, you can't diagnose what to do and how to pivot and make changes to where you're spending dollars, or even to have the resources, the contingency resources in order to be able to address a surprise. More importantly, you need to be aware that we're in the midst of a massive shift in consumer behavior, unlike anything that any of us have experienced in senior living. Early on in 2020, heard a lot of conversations talking about, gosh, are we going to see some of the same things happen that did when the housing market bubble burst back in 2008, 9, 10? Are we going to see some of those same things happen, the same impact? And, it was incredible. It's like, no, we're all learning something new. Even those of us who have been doing this for a long time have, seen it, been there, done it, had to really, learn some new things. And our consumers are exactly the same way. We were already on a little bit of a slow trajectory of getting our primary independent living target market more used to, newer ways of using technology. And the global pandemic just really catapulted everyone, prospects as well as staff at communities, really got us over a big learning curve. So traditional tactics, they're changing in effectiveness, and, new tech tactics, they're gaining in prominence. I remember, years ago, where a lot of the conversation on budgeting was, how big should our ad be in the the yellow pages? Should we be putting ads in the yellow pages? Well, if our competitors are there, shouldn't we be there? Well, now I'm not even sure some of our oldest prospective residents are even using a physical yellow page anymore. I don't even know if they produce them. Everybody's, going to doing their research online. If you don't have a Google My Business page that is, well set up and properly optimized, you're losing out on something as simple as someone trying to search for a phone number. So, as I mentioned, the pandemic experience over this past year and a half has really accelerated these changes. So you owe it to yourself, to your residents, to monitor every component of your program. It's really at this stage, it's unreasonable to assume that your mix of direct mail, traditional advertising, things like print, radio, TV, billboards, and digital, that it's unrealistic to assume that they are going to be serving you the same way as they did 5 years ago, or frankly, 5 years from now. So key here is stay alert and monitor changes in these years that we're living through right now. Another usual suspect that we hear is we don't know what's working. And this, of course, is closely related to the first comment. Now, we're going to address this more as we go forward in our session, but it's important to make a note about this, that the quality of your data is directly and fully connected to the day-to-day use of your CRM. That's your customer relationship management tool. There's several different options that are in the field. And what's remarkable is, and I had a colleague use this analogy one time, that there's many communities that have this powerful tool and they're not using it, and they're not using it to help guide their day-to-day sales process and how they're nurturing their prospects from initial inquiry to a sale, but they're also not using it to really drive their marketing program and help determine what needs to be most effective. The analogy really is that you've got this expensive, beautiful Cadillac, and it's up on blocks in your backyard. So the point being is, if you don't have information now going into this fall's budgeting process, we really want to encourage you to start taking steps now to consistently track the data. Otherwise, you're going to get to the same point next year and you're going to be experiencing the same challenge. And the third key comment that we typically hear is, well, money is tight, and so we can't spend money on marketing right now. And we absolutely know and understand and respect that this whole past year with COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on communities' budgets with all its unexpected expenses. We know that all departments across many organizations had to chip in and contribute to paying for absolutely essential things like, PPE and appropriate cleaning supplies and equipment. And so we absolutely understand that. But one of the things that, as we're moving forward, it's important to note is we believe your marketing budget truly is an investment. It's not a cost center. But, so we know that there's a lot of leadership teams that struggle with this concept. And, a lot of times the first knee-jerk reaction is we've got to cut marketing costs when times are hard. But in our experience, this is really a symptom of not establishing a system of metrics and ratios that the team can understand and trust when evaluating the marketing program. So if you don't set your budget based on your goals, your historic conversion rates of leads to appointments to sales, then I get it, your hesitancy is understandable. But this whole session is going to be dedicated to showing just how you can set up a system that is going to draw trustworthy, transparent connections between the money invested and the move-in revenue that's created. So with that, I know it's rather a bit involved setup, but I am going to turn things over to Amy to start getting into some of the nitty-gritty useful points as you start your budgeting process. Amy?
All right. Thanks very much, Lisa. I haven't seen yellow pages in quite some time. All right, there we go. So your strategic goals, they need to drive your budget. The first step in preparing for budget season is to know what your goals are. Starting with the end in mind, you can ask yourself some questions like, what level of revenue does your operations budget need to maintain itself? Now, this is a core question, and everything that goes into your marketing budget needs to have a clear path toward meeting your occupancy goals. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. Everything that goes into your marketing budget needs to have a clear path toward meeting your occupancy goals. So it doesn't sound very groundbreaking, but back to the most common mistakes that Lisa was just talking about that can happen when you're busy and you're getting ready for budget season and it's kind of sneaking up on you. We hear a lot of people say, well, I'll just use last year's budget and tack on some extra because, don't budgets go up? Or it's been a really rough year, better cut that marketing budget. Or my personal favorite, I'm going to be the budgeting hero this year and show them how lean and mean I can be. But I'm going to suggest that we take a different approach. When we begin looking at a client's budget and working together, we start with questions and do some deep probing. Some of those might be, is your organization in growth mode? So, or are you focusing on maintaining a healthy census? Are you coming out of a strategic planning and now looking at laying the foundation for a multi-year spend? Did any of your buildings or any of your current buildings open 7 to 9 years ago? Meaning you're going to see some attrition. And is there something that you're going to need to do to update those? And are you taking any units offline? Are you doing some renovations so they won't be available to sell this year? So this approach helps you see the big picture and gets the process of the thinking and asking yourself and your team the questions. And then we get down to the details. So as a result, when you're looking at that big picture, think about what it means for you next year. What bigger ticket items do we anticipate this year? Might be something like a brand refresh, a new collateral, a new website. As Lisa said, this is some of the things that we reference as our usual suspects. What big things are we going to need to do? So take a look at it. Take your brand refresh. Does it represent you well? Does your brand represent you right now the way you want it to? And is it relevant for the next group of prospects who are going to be looking to move into a retirement community? Rule of thumb for your brand refresh. Refresh your positioning in your messaging platform every 5 to 7 years. How about a photo or a video shoot? Video has become so critical over the last year with the pandemic and everybody going online, and it's always been critical. But now it's almost so essential to your digital footprint. It's how you make your impression for the community's lifestyle and how you show who you are. Do you need to update or make some videos that don't already exist? Rule of thumb, refresh your video options and your photo options every 2 to 4 years. So a new website and collateral. With each brand refresh, if you're looking at changing things up, you'll need to refresh your website and collateral. So make sure that you plan for that. If your website is more than 5 years old, it's probably out of date by now. And then finally, Lisa spent a fair amount of time talking about your CRM and updates there. Is your CRM working for you and telling you what you need to know about the lead's life cycle? Does it tell you what it should cost to target a new audience? Can you go in there and run a report and know how long it takes a prospect from the very first touch to get to the move-in status? Optimizing and then using this kind of data from your CRM can be one of the most valuable and cost-saving tools in your toolbox. Rule of thumb, using the wrong tool is way more expensive than switching and having the right tool right now. We often do CRM assessments, and in fact, we do them all the time. If you're using a CRM correctly, you're getting results. So the key is to have you feed it good information, but what often gets lost in the busy shuffle is using that data as a foundation for almost every budgeting decision you'll make. How about taking a look at your competitive positioning and pricing analysis? How quickly is your market filling with competition, especially for the for-profit providers? What does that look for you? Who's opening up, or who's adding on? Is the market about to get really noisy, and are you going to, or are you really the only game in town? So you see a lot of communities going up. There's going to be a lot of PR and press, and you need to decide how you're going to handle that, and perhaps budget to take that on head to head. And then finally, your sales office staging and technology use. Are you using technology like the iPads, touchscreen, virtual tours? Most of us got around to that, using that last year, but some are still getting comfortable with it. So just make sure you have that in place, and it's just valuable for you. It's invaluable for the tools for your sales team.
Yeah, Amy, and I'll just kind of contribute one point on that last one is, something that's an interesting thing that we're seeing now is, vaccinations are really strong in a lot of areas. A lot of communities have been able to open back up and start in-person events and in-person appointments. And so communities that maybe haven't yet taken that leap to invest in the technology and the skill sets to be able to use them are thinking, whew, that time is past. I don't have to worry about it. But the reality is that this is here and it's here to stay. That the toothpaste is out of the tube. It's not going back in. And I can absolutely guarantee you that your competitors are using this. And so if you don't, it's actually going to speak volumes to your prospects about maybe kind of impact on your brand, or are these people really, modern and savvy enough to meet my needs? And so, even if you haven't done it yet, you still really need to jump into that space.
Great point, Lisa. It really is huge. It's easy. We're all seeing so much excitement and optimism of coming out of the pandemic and having handled it, and it's worthy of that, absolutely. But we can't let down our guard. We have to keep making sure our tools are up to date, and that we're keeping pace. So speaking of pandemics, let's talk about some of the lessons learned. So far, we're talking about how do we get around to asking ourselves the right questions for our budgeting. What should we be thinking about? So we've done all that, and we're kind of cruising along. We're collecting and using our data, seeing trends, watching our forecasting play out just as we planned, and quite frankly, feeling maybe brilliant. Then, a pandemic comes along. And of all the intel and the data that we have from last year, there's now going to be this big old asterisk, right? Because what happened last year no longer provides a groundwork for what might happen this year. It puts such a bump in that road of having seen our trends and being able to plan and know what we just about think is going to happen. Everything's changed. So it's not hard. You just need to take a fresh look. And so that when you're looking at your numbers from last year and planning ahead, think about it. Think about your direct mail responses. Probably took a really big dive after March of last year. Your number of appointments fell well below what you would typically expect and need. And you didn't maybe get the number of new leads that you planned on. That's all very much pandemic related. So you're looking at what happened before that, a couple of years leading up to that, so that you're not just isolating this one very odd, strange asterisk year. And you're making sure that as long as we're coming out of this and feeling confident, we still have uncertainty and it's going to linger. But as we kind of recover from this major unforeseen market interruption, you'll need to think differently about your benchmarks. You're going to need to create some new assumptions and do some thoughtful testing throughout 2022. So what does that look like, and how do you know where to start? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Lisa, to talk about discovering some new metrics.
Thank you, Amy. So yes, you've spent, at this point, working through your homework assignment here. You've had some really good, open, transformative, possibly conversations with your team. And so now it's, okay, so how do we tie the budgeting to the strategic goals. And, one of the things that I want to point out, because I know, we throw around the term strategic, it's almost a buzzword. When we're talking about strategic goals, this is really about setting priorities and allocating resources to achieve a goal. So, that's really what we're talking about. So as Amy was, laying out, if we're saying, how many sales do I need to go from where my current occupancy is to where I want it to be? But of course, there's also looking at that attrition. What has our historic attrition been? Because those numbers, it's not just about the net increase, it's about the gross increase, and looking at that, those trends, and not just looking at a blip over a month or a quarter or a single year, but looking over a 3, 4, 5 year period, where you can see some perhaps normalization of some of those trends. The finance field does it. So many other aspects that touch our business look at that. Marketing and sales are the same way. But while absolutely metrics are incredibly powerful, it is part science and it's part art. So, what do I mean by this? There's absolutely metrics and numeric trends. They're informed guidelines, but they're not rigid absolutes. We have a number of different benchmarks, a number of different things that, that for communities who don't have enough data, don't have enough reliable data to say, here's what our historic experience has been. We have some parameters to be able to help start that conversation, start us from a place of what is going to work for our market, our niche market here. But it's important to be looking at everything with a, kind of critical thinking skills, and sort of understanding that big picture, and sort of knowing that human element that can come in and say, it's we need to not just take it exactly at that exact number all the way down to the 10th or the 1000th percentage point. So anyway, and here's kind of a start to how to think about that. The core component of any marketing program is what volume of leads will be needed to achieve your sales goals, and where are those leads going to come from? And then how are you ensuring that you're budgeting appropriately for the amount of lead generation that you're going to need to achieve the goals? And so, this involves targeting the proportion of sales that you're expecting to come from each major type of lead generation, what those closing rates are going to be, and what the cost per lead for each of those resources will be. Now, for those of you who have seen us present at other conferences and other webinars, that we sometimes we put a lot of numbers up here, but what we think is really useful with this particular visual is just to illustrate the point that cost per lead and closing rates, they're very different by lead source. So for example, a digital lead, which is, as Amy had talked about, it's really kind of come into its own in our field this past year. So digital lead, it's going to have a relatively low cost, but in many cases, it also has a low closing rate, particularly if your digital program is primarily focused on bringing in top of funnel, people who want to just start the education process. They're going to, over a year, maybe have a lower closing rate. But as I said, the cost per lead for that is relatively low. Now, a referral-based lead, this is our word of mouth, this is our resident referrals, they're going to have low cost because that's really about manpower. That's really about making those connections and cultivating those relationships. But those have some of the highest closing rates. And, typically we see that, a good half or even 2/3 or more of a community's sales are coming from those word of mouth category versus the paid sources. But the point being is that by mapping this out for your whole time period, that you'll be able to develop an accurate projection of how much money is going to be needed for lead generation in order to achieve your goals. So, just a little anecdote here. One time, after walking through this philosophy with a CEO, he sat back and he hypothesized. He said, So, if what you're saying is true, then why wouldn't we put all of our marketing efforts and all of our marketing, dollars towards the source category that has the lowest cost per lead and the highest closing ratio? And, the answer is, I mean, yes, I can absolutely see why there would be that connecting those dots, but there's the collective impact of the integrated campaign. So an appropriate proportion of traditional advertising, which frankly, because, you're putting an ad out in a paper, out on the TV, it's hitting a lot of eyeballs that you're paying for it just to hit the eyeballs of people who, may not be age qualified, may not be income qualified. It has among some of the highest cost, but the benefit is that traditional advertising will help reinforce and enhance the results of your more targeted efforts in things like digital, direct mail, even helping to have an impact on referrals. So, that's an important thing to consider there. So now the other key thing is using your historic data or benchmarks to be able to project what proportion of sales from different sources, backing in using closing rates to say, so this is how many leads I need, and here's my cost per lead for direct mail or digital or traditional. What does my budget need to look like? That represents the core part of your budget. Those are the dollars that are going to work the hardest for you, and you're going to want to examine and measure and say, are they doing what they're expected to do? But that's not the only thing that you need to be thinking about from a budgeting standpoint. So, hopefully this section is really going to give everybody some real practical tools, literally a checklist. So when you're planning for something like things like referrals, PR, outreach, drive-by, that word of mouth category of lead sources, you need to make sure that you're thinking through and budgeting effectively for referral program expenses and incentives, networking and outreach expenses, the cost to join the local chamber or, another, networking group where you're going to be able to connect with influencers and mavens in the community. PR services, is that something that you have staff that are going to provide those services, or do you need to partner with an external expert to be able to provide that? Things like community events, sponsorships. You want to be making sure that you're not redirecting your valuable lead generation producing dollars to supporting, very worthwhile relationship things like sponsorships, but you need to have a separate category for that. Digital advertising. Certainly you want to make sure that you're budgeting an appropriate monthly spend that is going to enable you to get through the whole month and, be able to, bring in those clicks and be competitive in getting your ads to show up in the right places on, Google and social and, programmatic advertising. But you also need to make sure that you're thinking about how are you going to manage and optimize that digital spend? Again, are you maybe perhaps a multi-site or a larger organization that can justify having a specialist on staff to be able to do this? Or do you need, what oftentimes is the case in our field, do you need to contract with an expert who's going to be monitoring and managing this and staying on top of the changing trends and the changing algorithms in digital? Creative assets, things like landing pages, dynamic, banner ads, content marketing, because with digital, to really have an effective program, and we've talked about this in other webinars, you can't just be pouring in leads on the top and having a very flat process to hopefully they connect with a salesperson, but you're going to need to nurture them digitally. They're going to behave differently than traditional, leads who pick up the phone and come in for an event or an appointment. They want to maybe hide in the shadow for a bit while they do their learning and get their education. So you want to make sure that you have budget for a proper drip campaign, blogs and e-newsletters, social media management, and doing those posts. On the direct mail and event side, so direct mail has long been a really powerful, workhorse for our field. And while this past year, because people weren't able to come in for physical events, we saw the impact of direct mail change in some cases. But we also saw a lot of people who, were devouring everything that came in through their mailbox because they had time. So when you're thinking about budgeting for your direct mail and events, you want to make sure that you are allowing appropriate budgets for creative services. Again, is that someone that's in-house, or are you, working with a partner on that? Printing, mail house, postage costs, things like call tracking numbers, your mailing lists, making sure that you're getting a good, clean, targeted list, and also using those resources to potentially append data to leads that are in your CRM that maybe you have, you're lacking knowledge to be able to really effectively target them. And of course, your marketing event expenses. Traditional advertising, again, you want to make sure that you're having an appropriate spend amount for traditional advertising. But you also want to make sure that you're budgeting for planning and placement, negotiations with different media, making sure that you're going to have creative services and any production associated with developing, the creative assets. And again, call tracking numbers with direct mail and traditional, yes, you can track and put the information in the CRM through your sales counselors, but it's a best practice to also have call tracking numbers that can really help you look at where did those calls come from and be able to measure the effectiveness of different campaigns you're doing. And just another couple of final things on my budget checklist here is, Amy mentioned early on in the presentation, branding and collateral, and, things that you need to think about particularly if you're, the way you're telling your story needs a refresh, needs an update. So you want to be thinking through, do we have professional creative services that are really going to help us capture that story effectively, and how we are uniquely conveying our benefits to our audience in our market. And, the printing, the production, the photography. Amy talked about photography, video, signage, your website, and all the things that go along with, developing and maintaining a healthy website. And the final thing is, oftentimes we see in marketing budgets, there's things like office expenses, promotional items, development and training for team members to really maximize the effectiveness of what you're able to do with your marketing budget, and contingency allowance, and I know sometimes it can be, somewhat tempting to just say, hey, we're just going to tack on an extra amount of dollars here. But, there's an element of no one has a crystal ball. And so to be able to not budget yourself so tightly that if something, either a happy opportunity or a challenging obstacle comes down the path, that you have the ability and have some flexibility to capitalize on that opportunity or pivot and address that challenge without, robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, with different areas of your budget. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Amy to kind of take us across the finish line and talking about, all right, how do we make sure we end up with the right spend? Amy?
All right. Thank you, Lisa. So a lot of information here today. And what I want to do right now is really just kind of reach out with some really practical ideas to help you in that jumping off point of how do we do some of these things we've talked about today? How do we look at this differently? And what do we do with this budget after last year and everything that has happened? So if you're following along what we've done, you've identified your expenses for the upcoming year, the revenue required to operate. You've used your benchmarks, your historical data to determine spend, and you've adjusted for kind of post-COVID and what you think things might look like. And you do your budget, and then it's too much. So revenue really did take a serious hit last year and this year, and you're likely still in recovery mode. You can't buy your way out of recovery, but you can outsmart and outplan your competitors and create a leaner budget that acts like a bigger budget. So some of the ways that we look at a budget to accomplish that kind of thing is we really do think bigger. So for example, if we have a lead generation budget that we've created and we need to cut that, then we need to be more effective with how we handle the leads once we get them and already have them. Can you improve your closing rates? How do we invest wisely in our sales team to work with the leads that we already have, the ones that we've already paid for? Let's say you do monthly mailings. What if you replaced one of those mailings with a sales training that results in better closing rates? That's an investment, not just a cost, and it sets up your money saving efficiency for now and long term. Lisa mentioned referrals. That's such an important category. They cost way less, but how do we get people to make referrals? It's more important than ever that we really reach out to that source. What new ways can we tap into the source and make it a reliable way to get leads that are the least expensive for us and tend to convert at a higher rate? In fact, this is something that we find challenging with communities. There's a lot of programs out there, and oh, we'd really like for you to give us referrals, and there's incentives. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about a community that I had visited on site, and I asked a group of residents if any of them had ever referred a friend. Several of them raised their hand, and so I asked them, I said, hey, why'd you do that? Without fail, every one of them said it wasn't about getting, in this case, $1,000 incentive. It was because their executive director had coffee with them and asked them for referrals. So again, think about different ways to go about getting those referrals, and remember, kind of go back to some of the other thought-provoking, how can we get that where it doesn't necessarily have to cost us money? You don't have to throw money at everything to be more effective. So some of these examples are kind of that all hands on deck approach to smart budgeting. When we help clients approach budget season with these new perspectives, asking the questions we talked about today, throwing away the usual approach, we end up with leaner budgets that act like bigger budgets, and we set your team up for success. So all of our examples, are a few of the examples that I just shared with you are things that we've been doing and taking a look at again this year as we're approaching clients with their budgets and really looking at it again. I'll say it again, the all hands on deck. How can we look at new and innovative and creative ways to make your budget go further so that we are neither overspending nor underspending? When we help clients approach budget season with that new perspective, asking the questions we talked about today, looking at getting results in new ways, we really do end up with leaner budgets, and they really set your team up for success. I'm going to give you a second to read that and laugh. One very last important piece of this puzzle. Things will change. Budgeting is about making the best decisions possible based on the information that we have available at the time. Our recommendation and our challenge for you this year is to make budgeting an ongoing venture. Return to your assumptions quarterly. Set goals for yourself about improving and using your data. And ask yourself, is there a different way, a more sustainable way for us to do our budget? And with that, Lisa, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, excellent. Well, I'll just make a few closing comments here to kind of tie it all in together, and then we'll answer some questions that I'm seeing come through the chat. So, we've covered a lot of stuff here today, and hopefully this is valuable. But in summary, when you're preparing to budget, you really want to take a moment to talk as a group to self-assess your past experiences. It's certainly what data might you have that really can inform what's working and what's not to help guide you forward into what do you do about it, but also to really take a moment to say, what about our budgeting process needs to be done differently and more effective in order to have a different outcome. We went through a lot of top questions to ask yourself as you go into that. What, at the core, what are your strategic goals? What are the things that we need to plan for and really make sure we're allocating resources effectively that are going to have an impact on, our bottom line? What are those proactive updates and investments that we need to make? And what are the things that we've learned about the pandemic? One of the things about those proactive updates is sometimes you just can't, eat the whole elephant in a single year, so to speak. You need to really kind of plan it out over time in order to be able to accomplish something and do it within your budget, such as redeveloping your brand and then your collateral and then your website. It's not something that has to be done all in the same budget year. It's something that you can spread out over time in order to make sure that you can accomplish it, but not hamstring your lead generation, efforts. Again, connecting your budget to your strategic goals, it's an art and a science. And, those guidelines of those metrics and your historical experience and some benchmarks in the field are a good starting point. But then you want to use your critical thinking skills to take a look at your particular situation and say, what is that confluent program going to be, and how can we test and make adjustments as we go, and how do we make sure that we have the right the right things set up to help our lead generation dollars be as effective as possible. Amy talked a good bit about, ways you can delight your CFO. And I keep coming back to, this whole process enables the marketing and sales leaderships to speak a common language with the CFO and really everyone in the C-suite. And that's one of the most exciting and powerful things that can come out of this. And then, of course, the final note is, you never want to put it on autopilot. Certainly you want to make sure you give things a chance to work and be able to produce data. But just as we've learned this past year and a half, things can change rapidly. So it's always a good rule of thumb to be able to take a look at, what's working, what's not, where are we according to goal? And it's going to be much more efficient to course correct when you might be just a little bit off of goal than if you wait till closer to the end of the year and suddenly that gap has grown into something that's really difficult to overcome. So hopefully this session today has given everybody some really good, useful tidbits to, take back and take into your planning budgeting session this coming year. And we're going to move into to some Q&A now. So let's see, we've got a couple of questions here. One of the questions, one of our attendees asked if we would go over some of the sales tools in the sales office that relate to technology. And that is a great question. So, certainly as Amy mentioned, there's a couple of things that you want to make sure that even just from a hardware standpoint, that you're investing in things like proper cameras, ring lights. So what you should be able to expect is that your sales counselors should be able to sit down in front of their computer, just like we are doing right now, and that they have a camera and they've got proper lighting, perhaps even some training to make sure that they know how to use this effectively, because, this doing exactly as we're doing right now is a way that many communities are having appointments. And it's remarkable that our prospects, they have really learned quickly and are absolutely doing well being on the other end of this. So things like the proper equipment to be able to have a video conference, to be able to have proper audio, to be able to have proper, Wi-Fi or internet bandwidth. So, you're not dealing with technology issues when you're trying to have a sales, sales appointment. Other things, iPads, or some type of tablet can be a great tool because this can also be something that your sales team can use not only to do a video chat, but also to be able to take people on a tour. More communities are enabling people to actually come into the community, but there are still some people, particularly if they're at a distance, who you can actually take them on a walk and talk with having a tablet that has a camera, and you can log in through FaceTime or Skype or or Zoom even, to be able to take them on a live virtual tour. And then there's other things that have also been tools in the past for a whole sales office experience. And I'll just throw out a few things here that we've seen and think are really good organizations. There's certainly Engrain has a great system for being able to have things that are in your besides just stuff hanging on the wall, but really be able to have a system where you can show parts of your community. Your Tour by Vector is another one that is also a really great sales tool. It really helps helps with that sales process. And I'm not here to do a pitch for anyone, but just, if you make some notes, these are good organizations to connect with. But being able to take a look at your sales space and say, how can we maximize the space we have, and not only create an opportunity to be able to connect with people virtually, or be able to, to be able to show things in a more dynamic manner, but it tells a lot about your brand. If someone comes in and sees that you are being modern and technology savvy, that is something that's really particularly important as we're heading towards the baby boomers being some of the core part of our audience. So hopefully that was useful. And then we have another question here where it says, you mentioned some marketers are focused on the top of the funnel leads with digital marketing. So what have you seen be effective in updating your lead nurture series through the pandemic and moving out of it for digital leads? So I'll come back. That's a detailed question, but there's another shorter one that's here. Additionally, is there an email marketing platform you prefer or recommend? So just real quickly on that one, we typically find MailChimp is what we use when we're doing automated email series, drip campaigns, and e-newsletters. There's a lot of benefits to that. Depending on what CRM you have, there are automated email platforms that are integrated in some of the CRMs. Enquire is one of them that has a robust marketing automation platform as part of it. But we certainly do recommend MailChimp, and that can integrate with your CRM as well. But on the more detailed question about having leads that come in at the top of the funnel, and how do we see nurturing those digital leads, particularly with the impact on the pandemic. I'm going to take a breath for a moment, and Amy, perhaps see if you want to address that question, then I can come back as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lisa. There's a number of things that come to mind, and this is such a great question, because what we're talking about is we've all day long, how do we get those leads into the funnel and convert them into sales at the most efficient rate when we're doing all this budgeting after the year that we've had. And what we've been doing, and what we see with the nurture series that you mentioned here is it's really called for a whole new messaging. So we've gone into our nurturing series, and we're talking to people in different ways now. We changed it up for the pandemic when people were at home and what the conversation looked like then, but now we've moved on. We're coming out of this, we're in a different place. So you have to make sure that your messaging is evolving and it's meeting people where they are right now today. And that's going to continually change. So I love the question of what should change about it, because again, it's another one of those, you don't set it and forget it. It's a nurture series. It's in the background. It's helping take your top of the funnel prospects and move them down so that when they do get to you, to the sales team, they're a warmer lead and they have a basis of knowledge. But what we say and do to get them there changes with every facet of the market and where you are. So the important thing is to make sure that you continually look at that, read that, and make sure your messaging is up to date and current with what you're trying to put out there.
Yeah, and I would add to that. So one of the things that's interesting is, so there's certain things that are good best practices that haven't changed. So things like, being able to talk to your sales team and say, what are some of the common, questions that come up? What are some of the common stumbling blocks? To be able and to recognize that when you're getting people that are in at the top of the funnel, that something has triggered them to want to do some research. And so thinking through, well, what is that decision tree? What are some of the common questions that they're going to have? And so you want to make sure that your drip campaign is, as Amy said, meeting people where they are. So, sort of proactively guessing, educated guess of what are they going to ask, and be able to then, take that information out and start to educate and start to inspire and provide them with key calls to action. So those types of best practices, they're still at play. They're still important. But then what you have to look at is what are the things that have come up as new questions? Are people saying, I'm not sure how I'm going to pay for this. I'm not sure what, the impact of the housing market or the economy is going to be on this. I'm not sure how I feel about coming into a congregate living situation, or in the case of higher levels of care, having the adult child saying, how do I feel about this with my parent? And so being able to address those things head on in a practical, educational manner, because a key thing here is establishing yourself as a trusted resource of good content, and providing them with something that's not simply about, let me make a sale, but providing them with good information that they can trust, and constantly giving them the opportunity of places to click. And then a platform like a MailChimp will give you a lot of great data to say, what's the open rate? What's the click-through rate? You'll be able to see what are the topics of your blogs that garner the most attention. And the other thing that I think is really important is starting to look at how can you have dynamic content that is going to change and retarget based on what someone clicks on or what their path is. So I know that's a lot to kind of throw out there, but hopefully that provides some answers to that question. Keeping an eye on the time here, we have another question that says, are there any conferences you would recommend specifically for a sales and marketing team? And that's a really great question. So one of the things that's really exciting at this time is a lot of the, actually I would say probably all of the state leading age organizations have provided an opportunity to be able to participate virtually. And that one of the things that does is it takes off of your your budget, your need to budget for travel expenses, and providing an opportunity to open up that content, open up that resource to so many more people. So I would, number one, start with your state's leading age, and also look at national leading age national for resources. Depending on where you are, I know that for one, Pennsylvania, which is not far from where we're headquartered, they have a marketing and public relations society group that's specific for the senior living field. And so there's a lot of great content for people that are at that that focus area. Those are what I can think of off the top of my head. And then certainly it always is healthy to get a little bit outside the field, and be able to, look at other types of conferences, learn more about things like, Google, and they have a conference. So, different things like that we would absolutely advise as well. Amy, I don't know if you have anything else off the top of your head you can think of.
Well, not specifically, but I think you hit on the key thing, Lisa. It's what we're always saying is just making sure that you are tapping into those resources and using them, because information is flying at us 90 miles per hour, and keeping up with it. It should be a part of your your daily work effort and what you do. It's going to make you more effective in the end. So I think you put a lot of resources out there, and there's so much free access to classes and information online that if you can encourage your sales team and your people to take an hour out of the day and spend time doing that, they grow, and so does your success rate.
Great. Well, it is just 1 o'clock, and I know a lot of times this is usually the witching hour where people then have to hop off and go do something else. So as we said before, we have recorded this, and so we'll be making this this recording available for all of our registrants and participants. So be on the lookout for that email. I think typically it might arrive in your inbox tomorrow. But certainly if there are other questions that you end up having that we haven't answered here today, please feel free to reach out to us. Always a pleasure to share our insights and knowledge. And Amy, thank you for joining me on this webinar today. And we thank you to all of our participants.
Thanks, everyone.